What is your favorite thing about My Hero Academia? Well, for a show with hero in the name, it sure has some fantastic villains with terrifying powers, like the Shie Hasaikai's Overhaul and the League of Villains Tomura Shigaraki. But one of my favorite things that doesn't get talked about a lot is that My Hero Academia might just be the most realistic superhero show. Now, I know that seems like a stretch considering there's a character who has the power of genes, but hear me out. One thing that has always bothered me about superheroes is just how many superpowers they'd actually need to have to function. If Superman's going to fly, he's also going to need some extremely hollow bones. If the Flash is going to run really fast, he's going to need some super feet that resist that incredible friction. The point is, if you had most superpowers in real life, they would physically tear you apart, unless you had some backup powers just to protect you from your original powers. But oh boy, does My Hero Academia have some characters getting just absolutely obliterated by their own powers. In My Hero, we see our main character Deku break finger after finger in a truly painful fashion as he tries to control One for All's immense power. We also see characters like Dabi disfiguring themselves with their unique fire abilities. Depending on the user, quirks can have terrible side effects, and today we're going to look at the way that this phenomenon has affected two fan-favorite villains, Shigaraki Tomura and Chisaki Kai, and specifically why in one pivotal scene, Overhaul was afraid to go head-to-head with the leader of the League of Villains. Welcome to Wild Anime Theories, where we're not afraid to show how crazy we are for our favorite anime and manga. Today's theory was posted on our subreddit by the user Cold437, and it was an exciting look back at one of our favorite My Hero characters, the Season 4 villain Overhaul. By the way, if you want to see your theory made into a video on our channel as well, don't forget to visit the subreddit using the link below. So let's travel back in time to early in Season 4 of My Hero Academia, long before the League of Villains ascended to the heights of power they currently enjoy in the story, and before Shigaraki gained his new power-ups. Power-ups does seem a bit like an understatement. Before Shigaraki became wildly powerful, it seemed that to many of the villains and bad guys in the My Hero world, the League of Villains was basically a laughingstock. At least that's how it seemed to Chisaki Kai. In a dramatic meeting between the villains, Twice brought Chisaki to the League's hideout. It was Shigaraki's intention to invite Overhaul to join the League. Much to Shigaraki's surprise, however, Overhaul invited the League to work under him instead. According to Overhaul, the League had squandered every opportunity they'd had since the climatic battle between All Might and All for One. And so the absence of this great light and darkness had left a power vacuum in the world. But even though the League of Villains had access to powerful fighters like Muscular and Moonfish, they had failed to advance their actual goals. In addition, they could have better taken advantage of the presence of the hero killer Stain. And so, having seen Shigaraki fail to ascend, Chisaki insisted that the League of Villains should join under the wing of his Yakuza gang, the Shie Hasaikai. Overhaul was determined to become the leader of a new underworld to replace the gap left by All for One. After causing offense to the League, Magne tries to attack Overhaul. If you don't quite remember Magne, well, that's because she really hadn't been featured in the story much for several arcs. And that's because with one touch from Overhaul, she exploded. His powerful quirk allows him to disassemble and reassemble anything he touches, and Magne was not fortunate enough to be reassembled. Quickly after this, Mr. Compress also lost an arm in the same fashion. Shigaraki was rightfully ready to fight and avenge his comrade, but before the two could come to blows, Overhaul summoned a human shield who met his end by the villain's decay powers. Wow. Talk about loyalty. I hope that guy at least gets posthumously named the Shie Hasakai's Employee of the Month or something. So you'd think that after exploding 1.25 members of the League of Villains, Chisaki would be more than ready to continue to fight. But after this, he calmly says it would be for the best for them not to continue whittling down each other's forces. One casualty on each side would be plenty, though based on Overhaul's expression and tone here, it almost seems that he's particularly hesitant to go toe-to-toe with Shigaraki. Could this calm, cool, and collected villain with an overpowered quirk actually be scared of this fight? We all know that eventually the League of Villains has the last laugh and gave Overhaul a sickeningly fitting end. The Yakuza leader who engineered a serum that forcefully removed people's quirks had his own quirk taken away. However, it wasn't taken away due to a dosage of the serum, but because Shigaraki decays and then cuts off Overhaul's hands, leaving him unable to channel his power.
Yes. Did
I mention how brutal this show gets? I mean, one minute you have colorful, zany school antics with characters like that frog girl and Grape Boy, and then the next minute you have forceful dismemberments. I mean, good on you, I guess, Kohei Horikoshi, for giving us such a diverse range of experiences to enjoy? Question mark? Back to that gruesome final exchange between a finally unmasked Chisaki Kai and Shigaraki Tomura though. I'm willing to bet that even if Chisaki hadn't been restrained, the result of his encounter would have been the same. Well, that might be a surprising claim given that Overhaul had just demonstrated himself to be an amazingly capable fighter. So why was he scared? I think that it might be the case that Overhaul was afraid to fight because his quirk wouldn't have done a single thing to Shigaraki. Why? Well, it all comes down to the quirk factor. You see, in My Hero Academia, having a quirk isn't as simple as having a superpower. A quirk factor consists of that superpower and of all the other physiological changes that accompany that power. In other words, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, it's all of the changes that make it so the heroes aren't actually destroyed all the time by their own powers. A great example of a quirk factor comes from Bakugo. We all know that his main power is to sweat explosive nitroglycerin. But did you know that Bakugo also has extra thick, tough skin on his hands? That extra quirk factor makes it so that Bakugo's arms aren't destroyed by his own explosions. Mashirao Ojiro, aka the guy with the tail, doesn't just have a tail. He has a whole additional system of bones and muscular structures that allow him to actually move that tail freely. And so most quirk users also have some built-in resistance to their quirk, though that resistance is not unlimited. Endeavor, for instance, can resist powerful flames. I mean, he's usually maintaining a fiery beard and mask constantly, and his skin isn't horribly damaged. Do you think that Endeavor shaves as part of his daily routine, or does he just burn his facial hair off? Beards aside, while Endeavor is resistant to flames, using too many of his techniques in succession can still overheat his body and leave him really damaged. The resistance to his quirk isn't perfect, in other words. Shigaraki has a wildly powerful resistance to his own quirk as well. When he uses his decay quirk on an opponent, they'll turn to dust nearly instantaneously. His quirk does not affect himself in the same way though. The constant decay has left him with perpetually chapped lips and skin desperately in need of some lotion, but for the most part, he's completely fine. When Shigaraki received his ultimate power-up, however, his quirk did affect himself more strongly. However, the level of output it took to begin decaying himself were insane levels that left him decaying everything within a radius that took up half the city. This is some insane next-level resistance that other characters in the story simply don't seem to have. Again, from Midoriya's broken fingers to Dabi's burned skin, many characters simply don't have the same quirk factors that protect the user from its own powers. That's also exactly the reason why Endeavor took so many tries in trying to genetically engineer his perfect fire and ice on Shoto. Toya just couldn't cut it in the resistance category, even though his flames burned hotter than Endeavor's own. Now, let's apply this to Overhaul's quirk. He has no resistance whatsoever. In fact, he frequently uses his quirk to deconstruct and then reconstruct himself in various ways. The deconstruction part too is very similar to Shigaraki's decay quirk. Both powers are pretty similar in their ability to take things apart. In fact, both are illustrated in the manga and the anime with a similar mosaic cracking texture. However, while Shigaraki would easily be able to decay Chisaki's body, who is shown to have little to no resistance to his own quirk, Chisaki would probably be absolutely powerless against Shigaraki's wild level of resistance of being decayed or deconstructed. And so this could be a big reason that season 4 of My Hero actually happened instead of ending right then and there in that warehouse confrontation. Overhaul was rightfully afraid to fight his natural enemy of his quirk. And I think that demonstrates the great nuance that Horikoshi has inserted into his story. Not only do you have the quirk powers themselves to factor into matchups, quirk factors also play an important role in who will win or lose a My Hero confrontation. That and whether a character goes plus ultra, of course. If you want to see more wild anime theories, don't forget to subscribe.